Hello. In this presentation, you will learn about a new fertilizer that can be greatly beneficial in reducing water pollution. Pollution that is caused by phosphatic fertilizers that result in algal bloom and ocean eutrophication. I am Chandrika Varadachari, the Chief Technology Officer of Actic Innovations and the inventor of the family of smart fertilizers that includes the smart micronutrients and smart phosphates. Ours is an agricultural technology research company. We specialize in designing ultra efficient, environment friendly fertilizers based on a revolutionary polymeric smart fertilizer technology platform. Our vision is to create a new generation of fertilizers that can provide a superior alternative to the current macronutrients, the NPK fertilizers, and the macronutrient fertilizers. To understand why we need a new phosphate fertilizer, we first need to understand what are the drawbacks of the fertilizers that are currently in use. The major phosphates consumed is diammonium phosphate or DAP, and to a limited extent, monoammonium phosphate or MAP and the triple superphosphate or TSP. All of these are water soluble and therefore can be leached through the soil or drained out on the surface. Waters polluted by such phosphates will have eutrophication or algal growth that severely affects aquatic life. This also results in a huge wastage of the nutrient phosphate. Phosphates are severely affected by fixation by soil components. After fixation, the phosphate is no longer available to plant. Therefore, excess fertilizer needs to be added. Thirdly, there's a mismatch between requirement and availability during the life cycle of the plant. In the initial stages, there's too much nutrient because the entire amount of phosphate is in the available form. Later, the nutrient gets fixed or washes out, and that is not enough when the plant requirement is higher. This results in either oversupply or deprivation of phosphate during the growth cycle. Some alternatives have been proposed, but do they really solve the problem? The existing alternatives are phosphate glasses, rock phosphate in different forms, phosphate solubilizing biofertilizers, etc. The inherent problems with these alternatives are, firstly, that nutrient release is controlled by either diffusion through membrane or hydrolysis mechanisms or by slow solubilization of the product. All these mechanisms are strongly influenced by soil pH, water, temperature, microbial population, and the whole soil environment. As a result, there is a mismatch between the rate of nutrient release from the fertilizer and the nutrient requirement by the crop. This translates to poor performance compared to the water-soluble phosphates, lower yields, lower return on investments, and not cost-effective. Water-soluble phosphates have some serious environmental and economic consequences. They cause severe pollution of water bodies due to surface runoff. Phosphate in water causes algae to bloom, and that results in large-scale death of fish and makes the water unfit for humans. Loss of 50 to 70% of added fertilizers is a waste of the farmer's investment. Therefore, there's a reluctance to use phosphates, particularly in the developing countries. Crop nutrition is imbalanced in the NP ratio, and this leads to poor yields. This is also a huge waste of phosphate ore reserves and a waste of energy and water that is required for production. Naturally, it's obvious to ask ourselves, if water solubility is causing all these problems, Why not make the phosphates insoluble? After all, this is very easy because phosphates are naturally insoluble. Example, the iron phosphate, aluminum phosphates, zinc phosphates, etc. are all insoluble. Ironically, soils actually contain nutrients in insoluble forms and plants do make use of it. The soil that supports this dense forest has very little soluble phosphate. It's mostly insoluble. But paradoxically, plants will not eat most of the insoluble phosphates that we produce in our labs or industries. And why this paradox? It is because plants, like humans, can only digest certain types of materials. We can eat and digest the leaves of this cabbage, but we cannot eat corn leaf or rice straw. This is because the enzymes and acids that our digestive system secretes can dissolve cabbage leaves, but not straw or wood. We can handle certain types of carbohydrates like starch in cereals, but cannot handle cellulose in tough leaves. The plant root acids and enzymes have to be able to dissolve the insoluble material to be able to absorb the nutrient. These phosphates of aluminum, iron, zinc, and many others are a big no. Plant roots cannot dissolve them, but smart phosphate is very different phosphate. It is easily digestible by plant root acids and enzymes. It is probably the only insoluble phosphate that is completely available to plant roots. This is because smart phosphate is specifically designed to mimic the way in which phosphate occurs naturally in a soil. It is a complex 3D crystalline structure. It will release nutrients only on activation by plant root exudates. It is plant digestible, so phosphate release is under the control of the plant itself. As a plant grows, its root system expands, its rhizospheric secretions increase, and it absorbs more nutrients. So, a smart phosphate fertilizer is basically a polymeric molecule. It's a calcium polyphosphate. It is water insoluble, but soluble in very dilute organic acids and chelates. Contains 100% plant food. All of the nutrients will be absorbed by the plant. Looking at smart phosphate at the molecular level, there are layers of polyphosphate templates. These are stacked up like a pack of cards. Calcium ions are present in between the stacks as well as on the surface of the template. Root acids and enzymes remove the calcium ions, and this causes the polyphosphate stack to break up. The dissolved calcium and phosphates are then absorbed into the root. We could also make interesting molecules called enhanced smart phosphates, which have micronutrients included within the polyphosphate template. For example, the template surface and interspaces can contain zinc, iron, manganese, copper, boron, or molybdenum. It could be just a couple of these or any combination to suit a particular crop and soil. Effects of adding smart phosphate fertilizers are: phosphate nutrient is available to the plant throughout its life. It will remain there in the soil for plants to take up the phosphate as and when they need it. The plant gets exact amounts of phosphate from start to finish. It is never overfed or underfed as with water-soluble fertilizers. This eliminates the mismatch between plant need and nutrient availability. Then, the entire molecule is plant food. There is no toxic residue in soil. There is no acidification of soil and there is no leaching. From the farmer's perspective, smart phosphate is highly beneficial. He will need to add only half the amount he is now adding as DAP. That's a lot less fertilizer, which will be a huge savings on cost and on labor. He gets more produce with yield increases of 5 to 10%, and overall, this is a significantly higher return on investment for him. The dosage for smart phosphate depends on soil and crop conditions. It is generally about 40 to 50% of the recommended dose of DAP for that crop, although it's frequently even lower than this. This would mean about 20 to 40 kilogram per hectare of P2O5, which translates to 45 to 90 kilogram per hectare of the product. This would be a basal soil application to be done before planting, only one application for a 4-month crop. All the field trials that we did for different types of crops show higher yields at lower dosages compared to DAP. In this wheat trial, smart phosphate at 25 kg per hectare P2O5 produced 11% yield increase, whereas DAP at 50 kg per hectare P2O5 produced 4% yield increase. Another trial with rice gave 41% yield increase at 30 kg per hectare P2O5 compared to DAP, which produced only half the yield increment at double the dosage of phosphate. Similar results with potato, where yields are 11% higher compared to only 3% with DAP, although it is dosed 4 times higher. Black gram, a legume, also gives a very impressive response. So all these trials were statistically designed, replicated, and the results were significant at the 5% probability. We also have several independent trials. This is one trial with cantaloupe in Arizona. Smart phosphate gave 12% higher yields and also higher sugar content in the melon. And this result was at a dosage of 50 pound per acre of P2O5, which is much less than the recommended dosage of 75 pounds per acre, which contained phosphoric and superphosphoric acids. This technology is protected by patents, product patents actually, which are granted in 5 countries. It's available for licensing or outright sale. For further information, feel free to contact our CEO Murli Vardachari at this email address. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.